session. My speech will not be so long so we can have more time to talk to each other rather than at you. First, in case you're wondering, the color coordination between me and Leif is completely coincidental. It's not some kind of...
It turns out we are all alike, I guess. So there goes that myth.
It's either that or some kind of American Jihad new uniform that we're trying to put out there.
Struggling against bad days.
Speaking of which, American Jihad, I think it's a brilliant title for the event, and I know that you got some grief. I know that it was controversial, but not all controversy is bad. I think it gets people to think and to talk, and to really challenge what the term means. As Leif said, we cannot allow the terms that define key values in our faith to be defined by others. Jihad does not mean holy war. As a matter of fact, the term holy war in Arabic translates as al-harb al-muqaddasa, which does not exist anywhere in the Arabic Islamic literature. Not in one place. It's an Orientalist term. It refers more to the Crusades than it does to anything within the Islamic precepts. What jihad does mean, as many of you do know, is a struggle towards embetterment. It's not just a struggle. It's a struggle towards embetterment, meaning if you see something wrong and you're trying to fix it, that is jihad. If you see evil and you try to empower goodness, that is jihad. So each and every one of us and the reason why that is so central and so important in Islam is because life is a challenge. That is the way that God mandated it to be. Whether we talk about Islamophobia as a challenge, or discrimination, or poverty, or the economy, or whatever it is that plagues our lives, poverty, disease, wars, all of these challenges that always will be there in every generation, every time, in every place. So long as humanity exists on planet Earth, there will be challenges. And so our approach as Muslims is to struggle to make a difference. It is a mandate for us to know that we have the ability to change things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God Almighty, obviously is the final determiner of events, but He has empowered us with a will and an ability to make a difference. That determination, that effort that you exert is jihad, and that's why it's so important in Islam. Now, when you say American Jihad, I think about that in two different ways. First, it's American Jihad as in my jihad as in America, but also it's American Jihad as in the struggle that faces America, American Jihad. Now, in terms of my jihad as an American, well, I have chosen to be a civil rights activist. I see certain things that are wrong in this society. I see discrimination. I see an oversimplification and a sort of one-dimensional understanding of Islam and Muslims that informs the discrimination process. I see a lack of dialogue. I see people who are not informed, the one-eyed leading the blind and telling others what Islam is and what Islam isn't, who Muslims are and who Muslims are not. And again, I see the consequences of that in daily life. So for me, working in order to create dialogue and inform and educate others about my faith and my people, but also to fight the discrimination that results from the misunderstanding, the civil rights work, that's my personal chosen jihad that I have chosen to make into a professional endeavor. But then when we talk about American Jihad as in the jihad that faces America as a whole, and it goes beyond my niche, here's what I think of. I think that the struggles that we are facing, the problems that we are facing, are not so much ideological. I don't think it's a question of the left versus the right, much as you hear about that on the blogosphere, on the radio, on cable television. It's not so much conservative versus liberal. It isn't so much Christian versus Muslim. It's not so much immigrant versus indigenous, if you can call the earlier immigrants that. What it really is a struggle between those who approach each and every problem that we face in a frenzied and paranoid and cynical manner that is only good for ratings and or votes, that is only good for money, and those who are interested in having a civil, real, meaningful discussion and dialogue and debate that can actually get us from point A to point B, that can actually create solutions for us. It is a methodological divide and not an ideological one. Now you can have on one end of the methodological divide individuals who are conservative or liberal, Christian or Muslim, this or that. Their approach, so long as it is one of really talking to each other to bring about solutions, they're on the same side. On the other hand, again, regardless of your ideological background, if you're going for the frenzied, paranoid, meaningless cacophony, then you're on the same line as far as I'm concerned. And that to me is the real struggle that is facing America today. Let's face it, when we're talking about the economic crisis, that is not a failure of economic or lack of resources, economy or lack of resources. Rather, it is, in my mind, an ethical failure, a failure of ethics. This is the richest nation on earth. We didn't really lose any natural resources in the past 10 years that causes us to have an economic crisis. Nothing really changed in terms of the fabric of our society. What has happened is that an ethical crisis, a crisis of a lack of morals, individuals incorporating standards that are not checked, that are meant to enrich in the short term at the expense of the long term. As a result of those standards, or those lack thereof, we end up with the economic crisis. When you talk about, if you look carefully at some of the advertisements for some of the medicines out there, some of the drugs, you find that one drug is meant to relieve your depression or relieve a headache, but then you listen to the disclaimers at the end. And as a result of relieving you from this particular issue, you can get arthritis and, craziness and, penile dysfunction, all sorts of things. And the reason is because those drug companies are unethical. They are purposely going for the short-term, gratification at the expense of really testing these drugs to a point where they can sell them publicly and not have to be too concerned about all these side effects. And again, they can do that legally because according to the current standards, all it takes is one test to be able to say 20 out of 30 people responded positively, or whatever it is the percentage they're looking for. So if you look at any industry, if you look at any problem that we are facing, you will find that it comes down to a lack of sincerity in really finding solutions to our problems, and a lack of ethics that puts immediate gain over long-term solutions. That to me is the struggle that is facing America, and that to me is what we as Muslims or otherwise need to face up to. Now I want to get to some definitions, some terminology. We already talked about jihad. I want to back up a little bit and talk about Islam itself, because that is the faith that informs my jihad, or this concept of jihad. And I want to tell Marwa, who's walking away, and everybody who was involved in the film, I want to tell you something. The overwhelming and pervasive misunderstanding of Islam and Muslims in America will not change so long as the question that is asked is, do you know the values of Islam? And the answer is yes. It isn't about knowing the 5 pillars of Islam, but knowing the values of Islam. That is never part of the discussion. When I go to talk at churches or synagogues or schools or wherever else, and I find myself facing 2 groups of people, one that knows nothing about Islam and perhaps only knows some of the stereotypes. You tell them, what do you know about Islam? Well, you guys can marry 4 wives. If you steal something, you gotta chop your hand off. You believe in this jihad thing where you blow yourself up and you get 72 virgins in heaven. And they're not trying to be funny. This is the information that's out there, front and center, the headlines on what it means to be a Muslim for a lot of people. And then when you get to Muslims trying to change misperception, what do they start off talking about? Well, in Islam, we don't do this, we do that. It's a list of do's and don'ts. We don't drink alcohol, we don't eat